There are moments, aren't quiet moments, when the ancient world feels present. Maybe it's the way the wind sighs through an abandoned city, a hum low in the earth, or the sudden, unsettling stillness. After a distant rumble, you blink, and for a fleeting second, the concrete jungle dissolves, replaced by an emerald canopy, a primeval symphony of chirps and roars. But this isn't some nostalgic daydream. Not anymore. This is now. The whispers of a forgotten era have become screams. Imagine a world where the very ground breathes with a purpose far older, far larger than anything humanity ever conceived. Where the kings of the Cretaceous, scales gleaming, teeth honed for millennia, stalk a shattered landscape, and beneath their thundering feet, something else stirs. Something equally ancient, yet disturbingly alien. It's not just a fight for survival. It's a silent, brutal reordering of everything, witnessed by the dwindling ashes of our own ambition. And sometimes, in the dead of night, you swear you can hear the chitter of a million tiny, colossal jaws, echoing the guttural challenge of a beast that should have been done. What if the future, our future, belonged not to us, but to the unstoppable collision of two forgotten titans? And what if we were merely caught in their shadow, waiting for the echo? The wind often whispered forgotten names through the skeletal remains of forgotten skyscrapers. Elara pulled her scarf tighter, its fraying wool doing little against the biting dust that tasted of pulverized concrete and lost futures. Her gaze swept the broken asphalt, a landscape of fractured dreams and skeletal steel. Behind her, the weary shuffle of their boots seemed a mournful rhythm on the shattered pavement. Each scavenged protein bar, each sip of filtered rainwater, felt like a silent, defiant miracle. Lately, the ground itself had begun to sigh. A deep, guttural thrumming vibrated through the soles of their worn shoes, a sound far older than any city. Then, an unsettling quiet would descend, swallowing even the distant caw of scavenger birds. It was a silence that spoke of immense ancient power, of something stirring beneath the ravaged earth. Elara felt it, a profound unease settling deep in her bones. Cold and heavy, still, they pushed west, toward the faint hope of the forgotten uplands. The relentless landscape itself seemed to resist their presence, a vast, indifferent tomb. The skeletal remains of the megastructure clawed at the perpetually bruised sky. Elara kept her steps light, each crunch of concrete shards a jarring echo in the unnatural quiet. Clear, Jax murmured, his breath pluming in the chill air, his beam sweeping across a gaping fissure. It wasn't a natural sinkhole. The edges were too clean, too deliberate. Lena knelt, her fingers brushing the obsidian-smooth rock at the fissure's rim. "Not rock," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Obsidian composite," Elara corrected, her own heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat. The air within the chasm below was surprisingly cool, carrying the faint, metallic scent of damp earth. And something else, something sharp, vaguely antiseptic. They repelled into the abyss, their lights swallowed by the sheer immensity beneath. The tunnels unfolded not as jagged caverns, but as perfectly arched corridors, impossibly vast, wide enough to swallow a grounded transport. Each archway receded into deeper blackness, a repeating nightmare of purposeful design. This was not geology. Elara's breath hitched, a cold dread snaking its way up her spine. The scale, the terrifying, meticulous scale of it, these were not natural formations. This was architecture, carved with an alien intelligence, a monstrous diligence. A silent, sickening realization dawned. Their desperate struggle for mere survival had just mutated. Now, they were standing on the precipice of understanding something immense, something truly terrifying, stirring in the dark beneath their feet. The Earth itself was breathing with a purpose not their own. The utility vehicle coughed, a fragile protest against the ruined suburb's silence. Alara's knuckles, white on the steering wheel, ached. Her breath fogged the cracked glass. They needed fuel, and a sliver of hope. Then the ground thrummed, a metallic pulse unlike any dinosaur. Over the skeletal horizon, a dark wave broke. Not scales, but chitin. Giant ants, each the size of a delivery van, armored and obsidian, moved with unnerving unison. A horrifying tide of segmented bodies and scything legs clicked a silent, relentless rhythm of consumption. This wasn't a hunt. It was a methodical harvest, an organized terror. Panic clawed at Ilara. She floored it, the engine screaming as one colossal ant, faceted eyes locked on them, broke formation. The rearview mirror filled with obsidian, with a million chittering jaws. She barely escaped the gnashing tide. The world, irrevocably reshaped, now whispered a colder, alien truth. The metallic scent of the lowlands finally thinned. Behind them burned. Ilara's lungs burned, each breath a hollow victory over the phantom chittering that still clawed at her mind. The jungle around them shifted, growing darker, denser, an oppressive emerald vault. Then, a shudder began deep in the earth, a low thrumming that vibrated through her boots, through her very bones. Through her very bone, a shadow, not of clouds, but of ancient, boundless power, seemed to fall upon the very air. It was a sound beyond human comprehension, guttural and vast, tearing through the canopy. The world screamed. A Tyrannosaurus Rex, not one, but many, judging by the unsettling echoes that followed. They were merely an inconvenience, less than a whisper, to these re-emerged titans. Ilara gripped her arm, the truth settling like a stone in her gut. They had fled one hell, only to find themselves trapped between two unimaginable forces. Ilara pressed herself against the grit-streaked rock, the canyon air thick with the scent of dried earth and something acrid, vaguely chemical. Her breath hitched, a thin rasp in the silence that felt louder than any roar. Below, the chittering symphony of an ant patrol, colossal bodies gleaming obsidian, had fallen unnaturally quiet. They faced a juvenile Tyrannosaurus, its scales a dull rust orange, frozen mid-stride, a half-eaten carcass forgotten by its clawed foot. Neither moved, a tableau of primal power held in a precarious whispered truce. Ilara's gaze flickered between the monstrous forces, a tremor starting deep in her chest. This wasn't a fight. It was a fragile, monstrous understanding of mutual destruction, a boundary they needed to cross. Their lives hung on this delicate, deadly balance, on the hope that these titans might overlook the tiny specks of humanity hidden in their shadow. Escape, path to the river, felt like a fantasy. Survival demanded an impossible, silent passage, a prayer for their distraction. From a crumbling perch, Ilara watched the Triceratops graze, their ancient forms a fleeting illusion of peace. A shiver traced her spine as the earth hummed, a low, unsettling vibration. Then, from the shadowed gulch, a dark tide poured forth. Colossal ants moving not in chaos, but a chilling, disciplined current. They ambushed a lone trike, a torrent of chitin targeting its thick legs and vulnerable underbelly. The beast roared, a sound of raw, surprised agony, its mighty head thrashing uselessly against the swarming strategic nightmare. Her breath hitched. This was no mere scavenge. This was conquest, cold and utterly deliberate. The giants were falling, not to tooth and claw, but to a collective, horrifying intellect that had learned to wield the world itself as a weapon. The forgotten facility offered a fragile reprieve, its concrete shell echoing their ragged breaths, a faint, earthy musk, cloying and strange, soon led them deeper, past rusted consoles and ancient dust motes dancing in their headlamps. Then, a vast cavern opened, not to sky, but to polished, pulsing darkness. Below, a chasm teemed with monstrous, chitinous life, a low thrum vibrating through the very soles of Alara's boots. And at its heart, a grotesque mountainous mass pulsed with an unnerving rhythmic beat. The Ant Queen, her myriad-faceted gaze held an ancient, terrible sentience, a silent hum resonating directly into Alara's skull, chilling her to the bone. Here was not just a creature, but a limitless, conquering will, a collective consciousness stretching beyond any human comprehension. The true war, Alara realized, with a sickening lurch in her gut, had only just begun. Rex, scarred and heavy with millennia of suns, stood upon his highest ridge. The ancient scent of pine and damp earth usually filled him with quiet assurance. But now, a different tang pierced the air, metallic and acrid. For too long, he dismissed the creeping blackness as mere annoyance, a minor pestilence in his vast domain. Yet, the endless, chittering tide had swallowed the lowland streams, encroaching ever closer to the nesting grounds where his hatchling slumbered. It was not merely food they sought. It was an erasure, a cold dread, unfamiliar and sharp, pierced his ancient heart. This was an existential threat, a final war for the very breath in his lungs and the future of his bloodline. His throat swelled, a low rumble building from deep within his formidable chest. Then, a thunderous roar ripped the silent afternoon, a primeval challenge that shuddered through the very bones of the earth. It was a call to arms, echoing across the emerald canopy, summoning every behemoth who still remembered the ancient ways. The king of predators, his eyes blazing, prepared for the ultimate stand. The volcanic plain exhaled a heat that shimmered, acrid with ash and hot rock. A low, guttural rumble pulsed from the cracked earth, escalating into a thunderous charge. Across the obsidian expanse, the dinosaurs materialized, a living avalanche of scales and teeth, their roars tearing the thin air. From the opposing ridge, an answering darkness spilled, a tide of colossal ants, their black exoskeletons glinting. Their uncountable mass was a chilling whisper that stole breath. They flowed, a river of chitinous legs and snapping mandibles, straight towards the primal titans. The impact was a silent explosion of sound, a primal scream. The groaning earth echoed. Dust and pulverized rock exploded skyward as ancient fury met alien instinct. From our precarious perch, we could only watch, a cold shiver creeping through our bones. Humanity was but a ghost in this colossal, uncaring ballet of annihilation. The air shrieked, but Alara felt only the dull ache. Dust, thick and metallic, coated her tongue. Liam, beside her, grim-faced, adjusted his goggles. They crouched at the geothermal field's edge, steam hissing from vents. Our only shot, Liam rasped, his voice thin against the distant thunder. Alara nodded, eyes on the deepest fissure. This wasn't victory. It was a desperate plea for time. She plunged the detonator, a whispered prayer leaving her lip. A sickening crunch, a guttural groan. The ground bucked, steam erupted, a scalding white fist punching into the bruised sky, rock and water shrieking. The world dissolved into a blinding inferno. They had their window. They had their barrier. They had their window. What price came next? She couldn't dare to think. The dust settled, thick and fine across the broken world. Alara squinted at the horizon, a bruised purple bleeding into a sickly yellow sky. No singular victor stood tall
A
here.
defiant war
Only
cry.
raw devastation. Twisted steel skeletons of old cities clawed at the air, silent monuments to a war waged by titans she barely comprehended. The earth itself seemed to sigh, exhaling the scent of ash, and something disturbingly sweet. The strange promise of new alien growth. A brittle quiet hung heavy, broken only by the grit, crunching under their boots. It's a different world now, Jax muttered, his voice raspy and thin. Alara nodded, her throat tight with a weariness that went bone deep. Their very survival was a fragile thread, tied irrevocably to understanding this scarred, unforgiving new balance. Every shadow now held a prehistoric echo. Alara pressed her cheek against the damp rock, the cold seeping into her bone-deep weariness. Another night unfurled, a canvas of unfamiliar stars above their makeshift cavern. She listened, as always, for the low seismic hum that spoke of colossal movement in the distance. The world was no longer theirs, just a vast, ancient stage where giants performed their timeless, brutal ballet. A rustle in the undergrowth nearby made her heart leap, but it was only a night critter, small and forgotten. They were whispers now, herself and the handful of others, ghosting through shadows. Survival was a constant, quiet prayer. Sometimes, a flicker of scale in the distant dawn, or the shriek of a giganotosaurus rending the air, reminded her of who truly owned the dawn. It was a life stripped bare, yet in its raw truth, a strange, persistent resilience bloom. They would endure, watching the earth breathe its new, terrifying life.